Hey guys, welcome to BudgetEDH. I'm your host Mike, and on this week's episode, we bring you a special deck tech because Dragon Shield came out with Game of Thrones inspired sleeves, so we made a Lannister themed deck based on those sleeves. So for this Lannister deck, we decided to build it based on Cersei Lannister, the Queen of Westeros. And what better commander to choose than Queen Marchesa? Queen Marchesa is 1, a red, a white, and a black for a legendary creature. She has Death Touch and Haste. Whenever she enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch, which is perfect for a Game of Thrones style deck. It brings in a political aspect to the game, which is exactly what we're looking to do with this deck. At the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent is the Monarch, put a 1/1 black assassin creature token with Death Touch and Haste onto the battlefield. This is also really flavorful. House Lannister has all sorts of different assassins throughout the show. I'm not going to ruin anything for you if you haven't watched it, but they have all sorts of assassins and things up their sleeve in the show. And this is the perfect commander to have a Lannister theme deck built upon. So for this deck tech, we lean heavily into the Monarch theme. So our commander gives us Monarch right on her, but we have a lot of other cards in here too that give us Monarch as well. Monarch is very powerful, especially in colors like Mardu that don't have a lot of card draw in them. Black is a decent card draw color, but outside of black, white and red don't really have a lot of card draw. So having a way of drawing a card every single turn stapled right onto your commander and other cards that we put in here is really good. In addition, there's a lot of cards in this deck that give you an added benefit if you are the Monarch. So you'll see that in a lot of the cards that we put into here. What better way of having a Game of Thrones inspired deck based on the Lannisters than having a political type deck, which is exactly what this deck does. There is a lot of political cards in here, a lot of ways that you can make deals with your opponents and try to build alliances throughout the game. In addition, there is a lot of ways of killing opponents' creatures. There's a lot of board wipes in here. There's a lot of single targeted removal. There is no shortage of dealing with your opponent's threats in here. In addition to, the Lannisters have a lot of money. And how do they get that? They got it through taxing their citizens and also taxing their opponents as well. So we've got a lot of tax type cards in here, ones that make your opponents pay costs whenever they do stuff, ways of drawing cards when your opponents do things. So it kind of plays that death and taxes type of feel to it as well. In addition, there is a lot of ways that we have put up walls in this deck, so you can kind of sit there and turtle up behind your walls in a pillow fort type strategy, which can be a lot of fun in Commander. You can sit behind your big walls in your moat, and you can make deals with your opponents and kill anything that might come and take the Monarch away from you. This is a really, really fun deck. I had a lot of fun putting it together. Really like Queen Marchesa. Next up, let's go over some of the stats of this deck. So we've got 10 ramp spells in here. We've got 9 ways of drawing cards, not including Marchesa herself. So you do have 10 in here as well. 17 pieces of interaction. So no shortage of ways of dealing with our opponent's threats that they might put on the board. Got quite a few board wipes in here as well. We've got 11 cards that either give you the Monarch or give you some sort of additional benefit for being the Monarch as well. We've got 18 ways of taxing our opponents whenever they play spells, taxing them whenever they draw additional cards. It may give us some sort of benefit as well. And then we've got 36 lands in this deck. I do have an asterisk there because one of them is a double-faced card. So let's get into the deck tech. So first up, I'm going to quickly go over the ramp that we have in this deck, and I'm going to kind of breeze through them. We've seen a lot of these cards before. So we've got Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Felwar Stone. I really like the 1 and 2 converted mana cost mana rocks in our deck. I don't like to have mana rocks that cost a lot in my commander decks. I like to keep them very cheap so we can get them out early and get our commander out a turn early, especially since she is a 4 converted mana cost commander. We've got Boros Signet, Rakdos Signet, and Orzhov Signet. Again, cheap cost, cheap artifacts to have in your deck. And then we've got the talismans. We've got Talisman of Indulgence, Talisman of Hierarchy, and Talisman of Conviction. I do like that Indulgence was reprinted, so it has come down in price a little bit. Since it was reprinted in that Prosper deck, dropped the price down just a little bit, made it a little bit cheaper for us. Next up, let's go over the interaction that we have in here. So first up, we're going to go through the single targeted removal, and we wanted to go with cards that are cheap and instants are going to be the most impactful cards. We can keep our mana up and get rid of anything that may try to get in and steal Monarch away from us. So we've got Swords to Plowshares, Terminate, and Fracture is a newer one out of Strixhaven. I like Fracture a lot. It deals with artifacts, enchantments, and also planeswalkers. You don't see as much, but being able to deal with 3 different things in a modal card is really good. We've also got Wear and Tear, again, another modal type card. Mortify is the same thing, and Bedevil is a card I put in a lot of black and red decks. It gets rid of artifacts, creatures, or planeswalkers as well. Then we've got Generous Gift, Vindicate, and Utter End. These deal with any type of permanent. Utter End is restrictive to just non-land permanents, but the other ones deal with any type of permanent, so you can blow up a land if you want. Generous Gift is going to give them an elephant. Not a huge deal, but you'll be able to deal with just about anything with these. Next up, we've got a card that is thematic in here. We've got Royal Assassin. I like putting this in. It's not the greatest card in the world, but again, it's on theme. It deals with any tapped creature, so if your opponents go to attack to get the Monarch back, you can actually tap your Assassin, kill the creature, which is kind of nice. It kills off mana dorks and a lot of different creatures that have a tap ability on them. So you're able to have this on the board and threaten that. It will hold those creatures back from doing what they want to do. Then we've got a couple of board wipes. We've got Cleansing Nova, which can kill all creatures or all artifacts and enchantments. We've got Feast of Succession, which actually is a Monarch type card, but it gives all creatures -4/-4 until end of turn and gives you the Monarch as well. We've got Austere Command, which is a modal board wipe, just like Cleansing Nova. It destroys all artifacts, all enchantments, all creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less, and all creatures with converted mana cost 4 or greater. You get to choose 2 of these. Really powerful card. And then next up, we've got a couple of cards that can help us win the game. Since we are sitting here and pillow forting up most of the game, sitting behind our walls, we will have time to get up to a critical mass of mana and cast a big spell and potentially win the game. So the first one that comes to mind is Approach of the Second Sun. Now, it is a 7 mana cost spell. If you've cast it from your hand, you've cast it another time this game, you can win the game. If you haven't, you put it back into your library, 7th from the top, and you gain 7 life. So basically, this puts a clock on your opponents where they're going to have to do something quickly if they don't want to lose the game. I really like this card in games that are going to be going a little bit longer, which I feel like it's going to happen a lot with this deck. Next up, we've got Debt to the Deathless. This is another way of potentially winning the game with 1 spell. So this is a X mana cost spell that each opponent loses 2 times X life, and you gain life equal to the life lost this way. So this basically will drain all your opponents out for double the cost of X that you paid into it, and it's just like Exsanguinate, except a little more expensive on the X cost and a little bit cheaper in price. Exsanguinate's about a $9 card, so this is a more budget version of that. But just really nice ways of potentially winning the game as you sit behind your walls and build up your resources. Next up, let's talk about all the ways that we're able to tax our opponents and make their life miserable. So first up, we've got a couple ways that we're going to tax our opponents if they want to attack us. And we don't want them to attack us because we don't want them to get the Monarch from us. We want to keep that so we can draw our card every single turn. So we've got Ghostly Prison, Baird, Steward of Argive, and Sphere of Safety. These are all enchantments or creatures that will make it more expensive to attack you. So Ghostly Prison, you got to pay 2 to attack. Baird, you got to pay 1 to attack. And Sphere of Safety, you got to pay X to attack, where X is the number of enchantments you control. We do have a lot of enchantments in this deck as well because they're very powerful in pillow fort type strategies. Then we've got Windborn Muse, kind of does a similar effect to Ghostly Prison, but it's on a creature. Kazul, Tyrant of the Cliffs, whenever a creature an opponent controls attacks you, if you're defending, you create a 3/3 ogre creature token unless that player pays 3. So again, another way of disincentivizing players from attacking you. Teysa does the same thing. I really like Teysa a lot. Whenever a creature deals damage to you, you destroy that creature and create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. It does go onto the battlefield on your side. So very powerful ability as well. Then we are going to tax our opponents for them casting spells. So we've got Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, was just reprinted in Crimson Vow. Non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. This taxes you as well, so there's one thing to note. Monologue Tax is a card that taxes your opponents whenever they cast their second spell each turn. You get to create a treasure token. Camball, Console of Allocation. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So if you're going up against somebody that's playing some sort of a storm strategy or a spell slinger style, this will deal them a lot of damage over the course of the game and incidentally gain you quite a bit of life as well. Then we've got the other Thalia. This one makes your opponent's creatures and non-basic lands enter the battlefield tapped. Blind Obedience, very similar. Artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. And this also has Extort, which is really nice. Whenever you cast a spell, you can pay a white or a black. If you do, each opponent loses a life and you gain that much life. It's also got some really nice artwork on here that really goes well with the Lannister and Monarch type theme that we have in this deck. And we've got Aven Mind Sensor. If an opponent would search a library, that player searches the top 4 cards of the library instead, so it kind of shuts down searching your deck. It does have flash, so you can trap your opponents that way. Keeper of the Accord. I like this card in white decks. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player has more creatures than you get to create a 1/1 soldier. And at the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player has more lands than you can search your library for planes and put it on the battlefield tap. So it's kind of like that catch-up mechanic that we've seen a lot from white. Revel in Riches, kind of on the pricier side. This card's gone up quite a bit over the last year, maybe a little bit longer, with all the treasure strategies that we've seen come out over the last couple of years. But this is a 5-mana enchantment. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a treasure token, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. So this is another way of potentially winning the game in the deck, but just having that first ability on there, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you get to create a treasure, is good enough just by itself. We will be killing a lot of creatures. Your opponents will be killing creatures too, and you'll be able to gain some resources whenever that happens as well. Next up, let's go over some of the political cards that we have in this deck. So first up, we've got a couple of ways of coding our opponent's creatures, and this is going to make it to where your opponents can't attack you, but they do have to attack. So that's really nice, especially if you have the Monarch. None of your opponents will be able to attack you, but they do have to attack. So first up, we've got Disrupt Decorum. Goad all creatures you don't control. And Goad just says, until your next turn, those creatures attack each combat if able and attack a player other than you if able. This was a very expensive card, but again, it was reprinted in Adventures of the Forgotten Realms Commander and brought the price down quite a bit. Carter Doomscourge, very similar. When it enters the battlefield until your next turn, creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able and attack a player other than you if able. So basically Goad as well. Whenever an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So another way of draining our opponents as well. Karazakar, the Eye Tyrant. This is a really cool creature. I do want to eventually make a deck based on this creature. Whenever you attack a player, tap target creature that player controls and goad it. Whenever an opponent attacks another one of your opponents, you and the attacking player each draw a card and lose 1 life. Another political type card. This is going to let you and the attacking player draw a card if they attack one of your opponents, which is nice as well. Then we've got Brina the Demagogue, another commander that's come out this year in Commander 21 Strixhaven Edition. Whenever a player attacks one or more of your opponents, if that opponent has more life than another of your opponents, that attacking player draws a card and you put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control. Shadrick Silverquill is a legendary creature. At the beginning of your combat, you can choose 2. Each mode must target a different player. You can put a 2/1 white and black Inkling creature into the battlefield. Target player draws a card and loses a life, and target player puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature they control. And then last but not least, we got a couple ways of making tokens in here. We've got Outlaw's Merriment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you can choose one of these at random. You put a 3/1 warrior, a 2/1 cleric, or a 1/2 rogue onto the battlefield. And then Assemble a Legion. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put a muster counter on it, and then put a 1/1 red and white soldier creature token with haste onto the battlefield for each muster counter on Assemble a Legion. Really great card, especially since we're going to be sitting there building up our resources over the course of the game. You can put a lot of muster counters on this and get a lot of creature tokens onto the battlefield. And both of these work really well with Skull Clamp. Next up, let's go over some of the cards that give us Monarch or give us additional value value if we are the Monarch. So we've got all the courts out of Commander Legends. I like these a lot. They came out with Commander Legends, and there is one for each color. So these basically trigger at the beginning of your upkeep and give you a different type of effect based on the color. They all also give you Monarch whenever they enter the battlefield too. So if one of your opponents took Monarch away from you, you can get it back with this card instead of attacking them. Court of Grace gives you a token. You either get a 1/1 white spirit or you get a 4/4 angel if you're the Monarch. Court of Ambition drains your opponents. It will drain them for 3 unless they discard a card, or if you're the Monarch, they will drain them for 6 unless they discard 2 cards. Court of Ire deals damage to targets, so you get 2 damage if you're not the Monarch and 7 damage if you are the Monarch. So really nice cards. Again, they work really well in this deck, especially since we are playing that Monarch style. Then we've got Marchesa's Decree. You gotta have that in here since we are a Marchesa deck. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, that creature's controller loses 1 life. Palace Jailer, when it enters the battlefield, exiles a creature an opponent controls until that opponent becomes the Monarch. So a nice way of getting rid of a problematic creature. Knights of the Black Rose, I like because it reminds me of Game of Thrones, those knights that Lannister has walking around the city. They kind of look similar to this. A lot of the cards that you see in the art on these Monarch cards translate to Game of Thrones so well. So Knights of the Black Rose, whenever an opponent becomes the Monarch, if you were the Monarch as the turn began, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. We got a little bit of a drain life sub-theme in this deck. Then we've got Custody Lich. Whenever you become the Monarch, target player sacks a creature. Archon of Coronation, as long as you're the Monarch, damage doesn't cause you to lose life. One thing to note with this is if a creature does deal damage to you, its controller still does become the Monarch. Skyline Despot is a dragon that was just reprinted in Adventures of the Forgotten Realms Commander, and that was a great reprint. It brought the price down quite a bit. Beginning of your upkeep, if you're the Monarch, you get to create a 5/5 dragon. So as long as you're the Monarch, you're going to be putting dragons onto the battlefield. It's going to get out of control pretty quickly, and it's going to give you another way of winning the game through combat. Thank you so much for watching our video today. If you like this video and you want to see more budget commander content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can also check us out on patreon.com/budgetedh. There's a bunch of different tiers and ways to interact with us outside of YouTube. We'll see you guys next time.